Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cardano Live. I have Pi Lanningham with me here today from SundaeSwap. He's going to tell us about the SundaeSwap project, a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. Just a reminder to all the viewers, Cardano Live does not accept tokens in exchange for promotion. We don't accept any tokens at all. We also do not do giveaways. So if you do see giveaways on YouTube or any of the social media, then just ignore them. That's not Cardano Live, us doing those giveaways. We try to remain objective and unbiased, although everyone is a little bit biased. Just be alert to that. So let's get on to our guest, Mr. Pi Lanningham. Thank you for being here on Cardano Live today. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm glad you're doing well. So what we'll talk about is how did SundaeSwap form? What is the current status? And where we are going, where SundaeSwap is going in the future, and based on anything that you can tell us at this point in time. Just so for something for viewers to be aware of, Cardano Live, we also don't promote any one particular project. We have the projects come on so they can tell us about their project, and SundaeSwap is one of them. It is a DEX being launched on Cardano. So Pi, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history? Oh, before I go into the history, what are the questions that I most often see? I was telling you about that before the podcast. Most often questions that I get are, how do I buy a token? Like SundaeSwap came out. How do I buy a token? How do I buy SundaeSwap? And when? When are you launching SundaeSwap? Okay. But what we'd like to talk about today is the why. Why would you buy SundaeSwap? Okay. Things that people often forget. What is the history behind the project? What is the project doing? So let's get into that, Pi. Tell us a little bit about how your team formed, a little bit about your backgrounds, and then where we're at today.
Yeah, so I'm Pi. That is like the number. I am a mathematician first and a programmer mathematician by passion, programmer by trade. And I'm the lead developer on SundaeSwap. So SundaeSwap, like Rick mentioned, is aiming to be one of the first DEXs launching on the Cardano smart contract platform. So for those who don't know what a DEX is, that is basically a piece of software that allows you to exchange one token for another, or a piece of software that allows you to provide kind of your token so that other people can swap, and you can earn kind of a base income on that. The team formed when our two co-founders, who, since the last time I was on air, have gone public. That's Mateen and Artem. They kind of really saw this opportunity. DEXs are a proven product and there's a proven need for them in the space, but there aren't any on Cardano yet, particularly because there aren't any smart contracts. So it was kind of this really perfect inflection point to put together a team to deliver on that kind of market niche. And so they kind of started formulating some ideas. They put together kind of an initial team to explore the idea. And, in the early days, we were going to launch on the Binance Smart Chain. And then kind of community interest really started blowing up and people got really interested in it. And so Mateen and Artem reevaluated and kind of parted ways with the previous tech team and brought myself and a few other developers on board. And we kind of shifted direction slightly. And so now we're launching directly as a native token on the Cardano blockchain, rather than trying to figure out the complexities of bridging and kind of maybe detracting value from the Cardano ecosystem. And so that was really kind of late April, early May when that started happening. And we came on board and we started figuring things out. And one of the most interesting things about our project at the time was the ISO, right? So this notion, for those who aren't familiar, is we had this idea to raise funds for the project by running a Cardano stake pool and issuing Sundae tokens to people who staked to that pool. We saw this, and we still see this, as a really kind of low risk way for our community to get involved. We got, it's kind of a bit of our rocky past of, we got all set up to do that technically, and we were ready to launch. And some of the people that we brought onto the team, if you look, Matt on our team page, has a lot of experience in this space. He has co-founded many companies that specifically deal with not quite crypto stuff, but like IPOs, right? So he worked on a project that was the IPO platform for a bunch of different companies. I'm forgetting the names right now, but that's not important.
He has some experience.
Yeah, he has some experience specifically in kind of this either at least an adjacent area of launching kind of stocks, and he started raising some really well-founded concerns that like the initial response we had gotten from lawyers about the ISO was, oh, it's fine, other projects are doing ICOs and stuff like that, and so as long as you're similar to what they're doing, you'll be fine. And he kind of made us second guess that and kind of seek second counsel, and it turned out to be a lot more complicated than we had initially planned. And so right now we have we delayed the ISO. Right, we were originally supposed to launch on the 25th, but because of that kind of newfound information in the legal landscape, we said, at the end of the day, we are trying to build a DEX. We're not an ISO company. And so if launching that too early would put the DEX at risk, we just didn't see that as a good option. And so right now we are working with a really skilled set of lawyers. If you look at our advisory board, we've got one of the lawyers who worked on the Chainlink launch consulting with us. And so we're trying to build the framework and shift some of the ways that we were planning to run the ISO so that we can do so in a safe way. We still want people to be able to get involved, and we still want that kind of open community participation model. But we just, we can't do so if it's going to put the DEX that we plan to launch at risk.
All right. It sounds like you guys have come a long way. It is a learning process. It sounds like you're kind of in the exploratory phase. All right. So I'm going to tell a brief of background, and then we'll come back to your current state of, where you're at, and is the token a security? Should it be registered? Does it have to be? Maybe not. We don't know. But people notice on Twitter, which is a very prominent crypto social media platform, I will sometimes be overly critical and under analytical about some things. For example, on Twitter, I actually went so far as to say, hey, if something is a food-swap, it's a scam, right? And I do that to encourage people to get thinking, and then I'll start asking some questions. Say, what kind of research have you done on this project? And that is to encourage people to look deeper into a project and not simply ask the question, how do I get the token? When does that token launch, right? That way they have a better understanding of what they're getting into. Now, to bring us back to where we are today, a good example is Uniswap has been determined by the SEC to be a security, okay? Now, that's not an issue. It's okay to be a security as long as, and I'm not a securities expert, right? But as long as if a coin, token, offering, or asset is a security, that it is registered as a security properly, and that it follows the reporting requirements described by the SEC. And that only applies to the United States. Some of these coins, they launch in other countries, or these what would be deemed a security. The business is registered in a different company. And like, for example, Cardano deployed in Japan in order to avoid being falling under SEC security requirements. For example, right, the initial ADA pre-sale, it was not an ICO, it was a pre-sale, occurred in Japan and other parts of Asia because you couldn't do it in the United States without having to jump through a bunch of hoops and possibly get, paying fines if you screw something up, right? Because lately, with the SEC, I've read when they have fined, they've issued fines. It's like typically $20 million. They hit EOS with a $20 million fine because they said, you sold a security in the United States without it following the proper procedures. We're going to slap you with the fine. EOS laughed it off because they raised $4 billion and said, okay, we'll follow your reporting requirements and we'll follow the rules, right? And so Uniswap, I don't know what the current state is for Uniswap, but yours is similar, like your white paper describes the similarities to Uniswap. But apparently you're still in the exploratory stage and talking with legal teams. And from what you just described, you just switched legal teams? because the initial council, you said, oh, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is doing it wrong, maybe. It's okay for you to do it because you'll just get lost in the weeds, and it's impossible for the SEC to enforce the requirements if you're just lost in the weeds, right? So that's just a little bit of background so people understand, with Uniswap, SushiSwap, that one launched on the Binance Smart Chain, right? I think that was on, Binance with SushiSwap. And maybe they deployed in Asia or something like that. But once it's released into the wild, there's nothing the SEC can do to individuals who are trading in it. I mean, it's on DEXs. Anyone can get to it. Anyone can play with it, right? All right. So where are you guys at today? What have you developed so far? There's links down below. White paper link, or there's a link to SundaeSwap.finance down below for the viewers. Check out the links down below. It has a link to the white paper there. And so where are you guys at today with white paper and development and all that kind of cool stuff?
Yeah. So so far, our effort has been focused around building an excellent team. And we're just starting to see that come online. None of our work is public yet, but we will be making our GitHub repos public kind of once we have a little bit more to show there, and so we've kind of got things organized. And we've been working on a series of white papers and green papers to explain some of our positions. So like you said, we did release an initial white paper. It's nothing particularly groundbreaking. It's mostly just background. It explains how Uniswap works, and it explains how Uniswap could work if translated to the Cardano model, and in particular points out a throughput problem with that translation. And so we've got a number of different models that we have come up with to solve that scalability problem, and we are currently investigating different properties of them. So, how much throughput can each of them achieve? What are the fee structures? Are they vulnerable to any one party being able to manipulate the market and things like that? So we're investigating those, and we're writing up white papers that explain the solution and explain some of our early findings about those. And so that's why we can't just release them all at once, because we want to give you something substantial that talks about what we have learned about that model.
Yeah.
Okay. I also mentioned green papers, and that is kind of tongue-in-cheek taking from the government space. So usually a paper that describes a policy or a set of policies is called a green paper in kind of governmental and regulation spaces. And so we're writing a quote-unquote green paper that describes a lot of this kind of complicated information that we have learned about, for example, the ISO and securities and SEC enforcement. And, is it possible for us to avoid being classified as a security if we change certain aspects of the ISO? Is it possible for us to register as a security and operate? So we're going to be exploring all of that as well. And so that's our current state. We've got a really good team that we've put together, and both at the leadership level, at the advisory level, we've got a great front-end team, and we're just starting to ramp up our back-end team. So that's our current state.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic. We'll get into future plans a little bit later in the podcast. We do have some viewer questions, kind of a future-related question. Jason Horner asked, he wonders so this isn't an answer. I wonder if, Sundae token will outperform A over the next 4 years. I mean, it definitely could. And that's not really an answerable question because it's speculative in nature. But DeFi, there's been a huge explosion, right? And the nice thing about having these teams come on Cardano Live and the other podcasts, like Pi first, you did your interview over on Pace podcast, and that was a really nice interview, very thorough interview. And the good thing about doing these interviews is you get an idea of what are they actually doing, because in Cardano, people have such a massively built up expectation. People are so excited to see DeFi come onto Cardano that they might overstep their financial means or their analytical process in an effort to make money, because people have seen DeFi, some of the tokens blow up, right? So a new, what's the latest and greatest token shows up on DeFi. What people need to be aware of when dealing with DEXs such as Uniswap is there is really good stuff to it, like all new things. And there's also some very risky, very high risk stuff. A lot of the brand new tokens. Okay, so you have Uniswap, it runs on Ethereum, right? And I can buy Uniswap with Ethereum, for example. And then on that DEX, I could take any token that deploys and trade it in and out of Uniswap and then eventually trade back to Ethereum, right? If I wanted to, or hold the token. If I chose to hold the token, let's say it's called Bob token, right? And I can trade that for Uniswap, and then Alice token shows up, and I can trade that for Bob to Uniswap back to Alice. That's the general idea, right? And what will happen is you get really smart players on those DEXs, and you get whales with really big bags, and they will pump and dump the latest token. They will pump the crap out of it, and they'll sell. And now you're left holding something that's relatively worthless. I can't say that's happened to me before because I watched the gameplay and I'm like, I can understand football by watching football. I don't have to actually play football, right? I watch what happens. So just be alert to that it will happen on Cardano. But in Cardano, you'll be like formally verified wrecked when it does happen, right? You won't be like, here's a good example. What I learned from Merrick. Merrick told me on Twitter one time. He runs Steak Nuts, and he's building the Block Frost project. And Cardano is not susceptible to flash loan attacks, right? Because there's the way the protocol is designed, and you know how, and you referred to it in one of your writings. I can't remember exactly what it was, but if there are a bunch of transactions in a queue, someone can execute a flash loan attack and pump and dump the coin or whatever that occurs. But apparently that isn't possible on Cardano because of the way the transactions are queued and handled and the native assets. I don't know the exact details. I'll see if one of those folks can come on Cardano Live and explain a little better. But that's a good example where Cardano is not susceptible to something that can occur on Ethereum. It's a security property of Cardano. So I take it your team is exploring those avenues. What are the capabilities of Cardano? How can you deploy a Uniswap-like DEX on Cardano and avoid the security hazards that are sometimes experienced on the Ethereum smart contracts version of a DEX? So to bring us back to where we are and then into the future, have you been studying Plutus and Haskell and all that cool stuff?
Yeah. So there's actually a lot in what you were saying that I want to respond to real quick.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt or anything.
That's okay.
So one of the things that I tried to convey on the podcast with Big Pay, and that I try to convey in every one of my interactions with the community, is that we are trying to put kind of transparency and ethics first. And all of the things that you're talking about in terms of asking the how and the what are the risks here are very much what we want to put front and center, right? And so that was a big part of why we were excited about the ISO model, in that and still are excited. It allows community participation with a lower risk level. But you are very right in that to get back to, I don't remember the name of the person who asked it, but somebody asked, is this token going to outperform? And again, I can't say that. My goal and my job is to make the best DEX that I can. And the community is going to determine what the value of the Sundae token is based on kind of what the features that we end up being able to build into it, and the uses. Right? It may just be a governance token. It may be a utility token that's used on the platform. That's part of what we're investigating with the SEC. So I wanted to address that and thank you for kind of informing the community and building a zeitgeist of skepticism, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's not to be overly critical, but it is to have the right amount of critical thought, because in some ecosystems, it appears that there's a lot of hype, but there's not enough people asking the questions and publishing the information that's important for people to make good decisions. And that's what we're trying to do. And that kind of leads us to a question from Sinubrius. And this question goes right along with what we're saying is, what is the ETA on being able to stake ADA for SundaeSwap tokens? And along that lines is also, how does it work? So let's ask Synibrius's question first, because we're headed into the future now. Do you have a rough idea of when do you think, or not required?
So I want to be very careful. Part of what has gotten us into trouble in the past is that with the early founding team, the main perspective that we were looking at things through was technical, right? And so we built our timelines, like the May 25th timeline, around what could we achieve technically. And that missed out on what we now have a bigger perspective around, which is that technical is just one slice of that, and there is a a legal and a community, and there's all these different lenses we have to look at the project through. And so I'm not going to be able to commit to any particular dates, and any timelines that I give are going to be very speculative. And as much as I try to soften the blow by saying this is just a guesstimate and things like that, if I give any kind of timeline, people are going to get really disappointed when that changes.
Okay, I got to totally back you up on that, because I've seen this happen with Charles. He has tried to give people a soft date because people want dates, and he's tried to give them, and it doesn't work. And he'll say, "Hey, my estimate is December 2020, and my estimate is Q3," and he uses language to soften the date, and it never fails. I see it 3 months later. I see people saying, "You promised a date." Dude, I didn't hear him promise anything ever on planet Earth. I've never heard him promise anything.
Yeah.
But he tries to give you an idea because people would like to know, because they have, an investment and they have an interest in the project. So it's okay to...
There's this fundamental tension between the transparency we want to provide and the chaos that is inherent in any new company, right? So with that being said, I can still... I will say that we are working full steam towards. We would be very happy if we were able to, start the ISO process sometime in Q3. That's a very big TBD, and it depends a lot on the legal framework. And we are moving towards, and would be very happy if we could launch with smart contracts, launch a very simple DEX with smart contracts as they launch on the mainnet on Cardano. But yes, thank you for kind of reinforcing that point. That is highly skeptical, and things in software change all the time. If there are any software engineers in the audience, that providing timelines is a very, very tricky business.
It is hard to do, especially when you are in exploratory territory.
Yeah.
So
and then one last thing you had asked, that I'm just remembering. You had asked if we'd been playing around with Plutus and following that. All of our developers are in the Plutus Pioneers program and have been following along with those lessons. And then we just brought on 2 really skilled Haskell developers. One who has a really long background of developing in Haskell, but is new to Plutus, and one that has less of a background in Haskell, but is still but has several years of experience playing around with Plutus. Had worked with IOHK and things like that. So we're building out that backend team, and we're getting our first prototypes of these protocols up and running. So
okay, that's good news. That's good to hear. And I would like to also follow up with Synibrius's question, and then roll into some of the things about the SEC. That's good new information that we learned today. And where he had asked, oops, I lost track of what that particular question was. The ETA on being able to stake ADA. So initially, when you publicized, people would, for example, delegate to a Sunday type pool or a Sunday partner pool or something like that. And you would keep a certain percentage of the reward. So instead of them receiving ADA, in return, they would receive Sunday tokens, right? Have you worked out the tokenomics of how much of which, or is that another financial aspect that you're still working on?
Yeah, so that's exactly how we had planned for it to launch, and we are trying to develop a plan that looks as close to that as possible. But that is one of the things that is really up in the air, and timelines with anything involving lawyers is, it's been a week since we a week and a half since we kind of announced that, and so no developments in that regard that I can break here.
Okay, yeah. And that kind of answers Carlos Aguirre's question where he said, will there be a minimum amount of ADA to stake? Do you know of the minimum yet, or is that also TBD?
So there is our goal, because the goal behind the ISO model is to allow as much community participation as possible. So there is a 10 ADA minimum staking requirement imposed by the Cardano blockchain that we can't go below that. And then in order to make it economically feasible, it is very likely that we will, if you have mined with Ethereum and joined an Ethereum mining pool, often what they will do is they will say, okay, you are earning Ethereum, but we're not going to pay you out every, fraction of a penny. Instead, we accrue a certain balance, and when we reach a threshold, then we will send it to your wallet. And so we will probably be doing something very similar to that, where there will be some threshold where it's economically feasible for us to send out ADA, and then we will do so. But we will be accruing rewards for everybody, no matter how little stake you have. And then with the launch of smart contracts, we believe that there's a way to allow our members of the community to pay those fees, so that if it's economically feasible for them to claim 3 Sunday tokens or whatever it is, they can choose to make that decision and claim it when they when their threshold is, rather than ours. So that was the state up until we had to put things on pause. It will very likely be the state when we go forward, but the details might change.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand you have to work out that economic model, because if you were to transfer a Sunday token from point A to point B, you would have to send it with at least, for example, 1.4180 ADA, which is right now it's worth $2. And if you had to burn $2 every 5 days multiplied by 2,000 customers, you're looking at to deliver your product, it's going to cost you over $5,000. I didn't do the math, but you probably did the math, and it would cost thousands of dollars worth of ADA to distribute the product, which then becomes economically unfeasible. So that's good that you looked to Ethereum and learned some lessons from there and said, okay, how did they do it, right? And then transfer that over to Cardano and say, how could we do it better on Cardano? First of all, the fees are lower, but it still has to make economic sense for both the service provider or the product provider, which is Sunday, and the customers, which would be the people delegating, staking, buying, trading, selling the Sunday tokens themselves. Right?
And one model we definitely did not want to go with is, like, if you go and you delegate your Tezos XTZ, many, they call them bakers over there, many bakers have a minimum delegation, and so if you delegate less than that, you never get anything. And so that is definitely a model we did not want to go with. And so we worked really hard to figure out ways that, no matter how little Sunday that you earn, we want to get that to you, because it's a representation of your involvement in the community.
That's interesting. Let's say, for example, when you write these smart contracts, because you're going to be writing smart contracts. Thank you for that question, Carlos. Let me bring down that question. So you'll be writing the smart contracts. Now, in Cardano, they really did think of everything. Look at the Cardano research page at iohk.io/research/library. There are 108 research papers over there. They describe the general idea of how to build smart contracts, and there's DeFi product research over there. There's all kinds of cool stuff, right? And people they have to consider that, when they're delegating or they're trying to buy and sell trade tokens, how's that going to work? So when you write the smart contract, would you be able to put like a minimum and say, let's say the minimum required to delegate would be 100 ADA, for example, and I try to delegate 90 ADA. That smart contract could say, nope, it's too low, and it'll just reject it, and you wouldn't pay the fee. And the user would know, like, they go, oh, it got rejected. Why did it get rejected? And then they could ask the question, right?
Yeah. So I have to draw a line, right? So there's two concepts here. There is the staking through the ISO, which is just delegating to a stake pool, which does not involve smart contracts. The smart contracts there would be in claiming the rewards, right?
Okay.
And there's some details there. If we're talking about like providing liquidity to a liquidity pool on our DEX when we eventually launch it, we have a bit more control, and obviously smart contracts are involved there. So one interesting thing about the Cardano EUTXO model is that there is not a way to naively, there is not a way to prevent someone paying money into a smart contract. The validation always happens on spend, on withdrawal. And so you have to structure your protocols so that they take that into account. And so if we wanted to impose a minimum, and I'm not saying that we are, I'm just kind of
hypothetically,
diving a little bit into that. So if we wanted to, then we would have to structure it in a way that that took that into account, so that, like, for example, you could pay into the contract, but it just doesn't do anything and you can withdraw it. So it functionally serves as if you had rejected the transaction. Similarly, there are ways to build state machines that will reject the state machine transition. And I'm getting a little bit technical, but that will reject the transition rather than like structuring it as a pure deposit model.
Okay. That's good that you go into the technical like that, because there's many different viewers out there. They have many different perspectives. Some of them want to say, hey, is there a level of technical competence here? Are they doing things correctly? And that will help some people out there, make a better informed decision in the long run. And, another interesting thing I learned today is that you've been talking to the SEC. Like, are you in active communications? You have a line with them, and you're saying, or your lawyers are, and they're saying, hey, how do we do this right? Or is this a security, stuff like that? Is that what's going on there?
So I don't think we've opened communications right now with the SEC. If we get a chance to do that, we very much want to have those conversations. One of the things that, to your point earlier about risk, the reason regulations exist is for that consumer protection and to prevent that kind of overhyped regret where, oh, I dumped my life savings into this not knowing better, right? And so that's the SEC is really all about those consumer protections. So there is a legitimate space and concern. They do have a legitimate claim in this space. And so we don't want to kind of shove them out or anything like that. But that is in direct tension with the benefits that DeFi does provide in terms of like being able to service markets and people who don't have the infrastructure where they live or in their lives to pass a KYC process, right? And so there's this tension that over the next couple of years in the courts is going to get resolved, likely with a strong arm from the SEC. And we really see our path forward as, playing nice, so to speak, trying to recognize their legitimate kind of voice in this conversation, but still kind of trying to communicate the incredible value that we do provide to people as a decentralized marketplace. The way that I like to describe it is we're trying to democratize finance, in the sense that we want to allow anybody to get safely involved in the financial services that a DEX can provide, and allow anybody to get safely involved in the profit sharing and the business side of things, and decentralize or democratize that piece of it too.
Okay, cool. And I'm glad you explained that, because it's important to note that people don't have to talk directly to the SEC. Like, you're talking to lawyers who understand. Like, I don't have to talk directly to the IRS. I never have. What I do is I talk to tax consultants, and the tax consultants who are getting paid, who I pay to make sure I do it correctly. And then the IRS gets my taxes, and they're like, okay, everybody's happy. We got our cut that you're supposed to be paying, and so on. And it's a good thing. So something that people need to be aware of is it's okay if something is a security, as long as it's done correctly, that is fine. And it's also okay to say, okay, this definitely doesn't fall under security, but it's important that people know, is it or is it not? And is it done correctly or is it not done correctly? And the SEC is there to protect consumers, as Pi indicated. They serve a role. Their key role is to protect consumers from scams, right? Because I mean, that's one of their main things is what they do, is they're trying to prevent scams. So, I mean, as long as you're talking to lawyers and consultants and they understand, I mean, that's a good thing. That's a really good sign. And again, like I mentioned, the IRS, like when it comes to taxes and operating a stake pool, if you operate a stake pool in the United States, like for example, I operate stake pools and I have a registered business and I pay taxes on it. It's a lot of taxes. And operating a DEX correctly in the United States, and when you have revenues coming in the form of cryptocurrencies, there's already plenty of laws on the books that explain, and I'm sure you've probably done crypto taxes before and you've seen, yeah, that adds up. Yeah, it ends up being a lot of money. So you have to figure that out and say, once we figure out what our revenues are going to be, now we got to figure out how we're going to how are we going to pay our taxes on this kind of stuff, depending on which country you're operating. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work. So you got a lot of work ahead of you. Anything else for future stuff for Sundae? Do you guys plan on building a wallet, like a specialized wallet specific for the DEX? Do you plan on making the swap platform? It'll be a website instead of a wallet. Like people can go onto a web page. Like the way it works on Saturn Network is you access the website and the website interacts with the smart contract for you. You don't have to go to the website, but it certainly does make it easier, right? So you're going to do a website, a wallet, anything else like that coming up?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to close the door on any possibilities. We are focused on delivering a DEX day one, and then we may build other offerings on top of that, specialized wallets or platforms that use the DEX for liquidity or things like that. So I don't want to close the door on any of those possibilities, but we're focused on delivering that DEX. The exact mechanism to interact with the smart contracts is still a little bit TBD, because the mechanism on launch day of the smart contracts is still a little bit TBD, right? Yoroi is working on their wallet connector interface, but it's possible that won't be ready by launch day. And so other projects are planning on, for example, having users download a program. We're looking at a bunch of those different options and seeing which one kind of makes the nicest and easiest user experience for our users. I would love, like, our ideal model, I will say, is for there to be a number of websites that interact with the smart contracts, ours being one of them. And then using the kind of Yoroi DApp connector to interface with that.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting to have it in Yoroi. One thing that I would like to see, just my own personal preference, is wallets that are more interoperable, because I am hearing from more and more new people. I was literally at a store a few days ago, and a guy had mentioned something about, the crypto market, it looks bloody, because it did. And I said, oh, yeah, it is. And he looks at me and said, do you know anything about crypto? And I told him, yeah, a little bit. And it turns out this guy was relatively new. He started in the last couple of months, and he started asking me an array of questions. He wanted to know more. He's like, how do I make money? How do I do this? The only thing he had was a Coinbase wallet on his phone. And I thought, this is part of the problem. To myself, I'm thinking, this is part of the problem, is there are so many different wallets. It was like some kind of Coinbase wallet app, and it's not Yoroi, and it's not Daedalus, and it can't interact with Cardano. And I'll give you another example. I am a big fan of Ledger Live. And as I can't recall, like the last time I used it was about a month ago, I could not actually put the ADA on the Ledger Live wallet, right? And I was thinking, this is one of the problems. There's so many different wallets out there. Which one do people use? So it's almost like you need a universal wallet, right? So it'd be really cool if there was for Cardano, some sort of universal wallet like Yoroi or plugin that could interact with more dexes. Now that makes it harder for the dex itself because it brings their competition into the same environment, right? But it makes it easier for the users because they can access multiple dexes through the same wallet, and they don't have to relearn a wallet, because you not only do you have to learn how to use it, but you have to learn whether or not you should trust it, right? Because some of these wallets you never know how it was made, right? There could be something wrong with it. But yeah, so that's maybe a good point for another podcast we should do in the future is universal wallets, and how many wallets is good and how many wallets is too many. That might be something we could talk about. But you do plan on building either a website or a wallet or some way to access the DEX, so there will be a mechanism for people to be able to trade. Would I be able? Here's a question, kind of leading up to the closure of the podcast. Would I be able to list a token on the SundaeSwap, right? On the DEX, right? Because it is a DEX, so it'll have Sunday that people earn in some way. And I have a new token. I make Bob token or Alice token, and I'll be able to list Bob token on the SundaeSwap desk, right? DEX, right?
Yes. So here is one of those areas where it gets really tricky, because from a legal standpoint, and we'll talk more about this in the green papers, but one of the things that may turn out to be a difficulty is if we look or are operating as too much of a market maker, right? If in principle we are this decentralized set of smart contracts, but functionally the only way someone can interact with it is through our platform, then that could cause tricky things legally for us, right? And so that's why I have to be very, very careful when I answer these things. In terms of being able to list your own tokens, the trajectory we are on right now is, yes, this is a family of smart contracts that can be used for any token pair. Where our hands might be a little bit more tied is which ones we show in our website, right? For example, and again, this is just a hypothetical, and we're still talking to lawyers about this, but it might be the case that the only tokens we are allowed to list on our website are ones that are classified as currencies, right? As opposed to securities or something like that. That's part of what is kind of changing the way that we think about like the ISO and things like that. So I don't want to overcommit in that regard, but in terms of the DEX capabilities that we want to provide, we want it to be a very open ecosystem that anybody can kind of participate in this family of smart contracts with Bob token or space coins or whatever it is.
Okay, I can totally understand what you're saying there, because I've read some of the problems that Uniswap ran into. Is you initially launched a token with utility and governance and giving people the ability to trade, right? But as energy starts to build among people, they drive the value up so rapidly or so high that it now creates the expectation of profit, where people say, hey, I can buy this coin because the number go up. Typical crypto. 99% of people get into crypto because number go up. That's just the way it is. I'm gonna stick to that number. I pulled it out of my butt, but I'm gonna stick to that number. 99% of people get into crypto because number go up, right? And what'll happen is it'll create an expectation of profit, and the SEC could look at it later on, which is what happened to Uniswap, and say, hey, that thing is that's a security now, because people are buying it with the expectation of profit based on how Uniswap performs, and basically the products or the performance. And it also has an effect where the underlying value of the asset affects the value of the asset, right? The underlying asset affects the value of the asset. And so that's when they start poking around. So it's a good thing you're talking to lawyers, and it sounds like you're doing the right things. In summary here, I'm going to say it sounds like you're still in the exploratory stage, right? If the product were
and building, I would say.
Exploratory and building. So building and exploratory. I've seen you have updated your website. You have updated your white paper. There's some differences from it was a few months ago. I don't remember what they are, but I do see that there are updates continuing in how you're going to deliver. Okay. So that's kind of exploratory. And if the token were deployed today, I would personally categorize it as high risk. Now, I know I'm sorry about being rude. I go on, actually, that looks like a scam, right? But what I mean is high risk, right? Is something high risk, which is fair enough. That's when you're in the exploratory stage. It is high risk. That's how things work, right? But people have to be aware of that. And that's why we're here today, right?
Absolutely.
Pretty much. Okay. All right. I think that's all we got for the podcast. We had a lot of viewer questions. Pi, did you cover everything that you wanted to put out? I'm going to give you the last words here for the viewers of the podcast. Oh, and a reminder to the viewers, feel free to hit like and subscribe down below. Feel free to share the videos with friends and family and even people you don't like, to help boost metrics, build the channel, and help get good quality information out to the community. And so, Pi, I will turn it over to you. Anything else for the viewers you'd like to put out?
No, I mean, just I am really overwhelmed with the kind of excitement in our community and the rate that our community has been growing. You look at things like when I joined the project, we had something like 10,000 Twitter followers, and now I think we're close to 70,000, and that's just in a very short span of time. It's been really overwhelming for me, and I really appreciate anybody who is understanding and understands that tension between the transparency we want to provide and the fact that sometimes plans have to shift. And so everybody who's been understanding of that and kind of appreciates the fact that we are trying to be kind of an ethical and transparent operation and set a standard for projects that come after us. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone I've seen that sentiment from.
All right. That's awesome. That is a great note to wrap up the podcast. Pi, feel free to come back on to Cardano Live in the coming months as more developments occur, as you start approaching, just hit me up. Let me know you know how to reach me and hop on back over to Cardano Live and let folks know how things are going with your project. Thank you for coming on Cardano Live today.
Thanks for having me on.
Right on. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Again, like and subscribe down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Share it with your friends and family and even people you don't like. Y'all have a great day. And remember, we're going for number one. Cardano's going for number one. Not number two, not number three. Going for number one. All categories. Thank you, Pi. Take care, everyone.